Recording. 1 second.
Good morning. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Water and Power Commissioners. Today is Tuesday, May 11th, 2021. This proceeding is broadcast on Channel 35. The exact broadcast times can be found by contacting Channel 35. General Counsel?
Good morning. In conformity with Governor Newsom's executive order of March 2020, this meeting is being conducted remotely. Similarly, in conformity with that order, public comment will be taken remotely. Any members of the public who wish to offer public comment may do so by calling area code 213-306-3065. Again, that number is 213-306-3065. When prompted, please enter 187-691-4317, followed by the pound sign. Again, that number is 187-691-4317, followed by the pound sign. The board secretary will identify you by prefixes of your number when it is your turn to speak. You will have 2 minutes on each item, up to a total of 5 minutes. When called, please identify the item or items you are speaking on. And please, if you are watching the proceedings on your computer, turn down the volume on your computer so that we don't get feedback. We may take a recess if we lose a quorum or have technical difficulties. Now, Madam Board Secretary, I'm going to turn it back over to you to take the roll.
Thank you. President McCLAIN-HILL?
Aye.
Vice President Reyes?
Present.
Commissioner BARAD?
Present.
Commissioner LEHRER?
Present.
Commissioner NEEMAN Brady?
Present.
5 members present in a quorum. President McCLAIN-HILL?
Thank you. I have no opening remarks this morning, so we can move to general public comment.
Okay. General public comments. Good morning, callers. Please state your full name and the agenda number, item number you will be speaking on. Please be mindful that you will have 2 minutes for comment. The first speaker is Charlotte Lang. Okay, the next speaker, Lewis. Can you please state your full name and the item number you'll be speaking on?
Quickly, I'm sorry, could board members please mute if you're not speaking? Thanks. Yvette, is the public comment line working?
Yes, it is. We did a new format, so, okay. Lewis, are you there? Please bear with us. We're having technical difficulty. Is it Lewis?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Please state your name and the item you'll be speaking on.
Yvette, is the public...
Please turn off the volume. Okay, Lewis, are you there? Okay.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Good morning, President McCLAIN-HILL and Commissioners. My name is Lisa Besqua with the Sierra Club, and I'm speaking on item 8D. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay.
Sorry, the system keeps muting me. I don't know what the issue is.
Okay. Sorry about that. You'll have 2 minutes starting now. Thank you.
Okay. First, I want to thank staff for their collaboration on LA 100 and meeting with us regularly on a variety of issues we would like the department to succeed on as it transitions to 100% clean energy and phases out its local power plants. There's a lot of good things in the presentation that we support, like reducing our reliance on Valley, deploying thousands of megawatts in new clean energy resources, which is unprecedented given the investment, and a goal of 50% of the distributed resources to go toward EJ communities. We do, however, have some concerns with respect to the hydrogen pieces in the presentation. And while we did support green hydrogen during the LA 100 advisory group meetings, we didn't suggest that we should put hydrogen in all of the in-basin generating stations as suggested in an RFI that is going to be issued. The intention was very much using green hydrogen in a limited fashion for the last percentages of the clean energy transition. The presentation that you'll hear today details a lot of initiatives that the department is moving forward that seemingly looks to expedite the procurement of in-basin hydrogen use without first moving forward on maximizing clean energy resources. Hydrogen within the basin, as you all may know, is very different than hydrogen at IPP. We need to consider whether we have enough local clean energy to produce the hydrogen so that it is truly green, how we are storing it, and how we are transporting it, given that this is also an urban area, unlike IPP. We think that DWP needs to be looking at prioritizing clean energy procurement and transmission upgrades with the same level of urgency now. And we think that any plan that prioritizes the utilization of hydrogen is not aligned with LA 100. Like I mentioned, we're concerned about this RFI being issued for green hydrogen at all in-basin generating stations. And we also wouldn't support using a blend of hydrogen with gas. It needs to be 100% green hydrogen. We do support a plan that prioritizes clean energy, and we know that we can retire the OTC units with the hydrogen, and that's what we would like to see. Thank you again for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. The next public speaker, Philip G. Please state your full name and the item you'll be speaking on. Okay, we'll go to the next caller, Kathy. Please state your full name and the item you'll be speaking on.
This is Kathy Jefferson Bancroft, and I'm speaking on item number 14. I am the tribal, I'm the tribal historic preservation officer for the Lone Pine Paiute Shoshone Reservation. And good morning to all the commissioners. I hope one day see you in person. But I wanted to take this chance to thank you for having a great staff who has worked out with us for almost 3 years now to come up with this template for a monitor compensation agreement. It's taken patience and time, but I think it's a really big step in forward, and hopefully there's more things like this to follow. We've been working on for several years a couple of pilot projects on the Owens Lake that are almost there, and I know if we just get together and communicate and have a conversation that they shouldn't be any problem, along with our Federal Register nomination and management plan, which are vital to moving forward and continue this working relationship with LADWP. I have really positive thoughts about the future in our relationship up here in the Valley on how to do what's best for all of us. So thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for taking this into consideration.
Thank you. Our next public comment is from Danielle. Please state your full name and the item you'll be speaking on.
Hello, Janelle Gutierrez. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead. What item will you be speaking on?
I'll be speaking on item number 14.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Manihu Commissioners, it's good to be part of your guys' meeting, and I just wanted to share on behalf of my TIPO department. I'm the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for Big Pine Paiute Tribe, and I just wanted to share my appreciation on the positive collaboration between LADWP and the TIPOs of the Owens Valley and Timbisha Shoshone tribes. We had many meetings and revisions and finally came up with an agreement. And this is a positive beginning for the lands and protection of cultural resources that's going to be including tribes, and having our tribal monitors out in the field, you know, in certain places that is important. This valley is very sacred to us, all the resources, the lands, the water, the air, life, and we just appreciate the opportunity of meeting with Chuck and Jane. They're awesome. And all the TIPOs working well together, and we finally produced this agreement, which we all agreed on. And I just hats off to those guys for, you know, for everybody, and doing something positive for our area. And thank you very much, Mana.
Thank you. The next public speaker has area code 760. Can you please state your full name and the item you'll be speaking on? One more time. Area code. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is Charlotte Lang. I'll be speaking on item number 14. And good morning, President Hill and Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity to comment on the compensation between the tribes and DWP, and really respectful to Jane and Hopman and Chuck Hollowell for putting this compensation together for our monitors. And we really respect really working and collaborating with DWP and to preserve in Mono and Inyo County our cultural resources. And thank you so much for putting this together, Jane and Chuck, and having these conversations for up here in the Valley in Mono and Inyo County. And as tribal chair for the Mono Lake Kizika tribe, I really appreciate being part of this great project and compensation moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And one last caller, Philip G. Can you please state your full name and the item you'll be speaking on? Philip? Okay. All public comment is now closed. President McCLAIN-HILL. You're on mute.
Sorry. Mr. Adams, do you have a general manager's report for us?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. And I guess the brief report today, and good morning to all the commissioners. It's nice to see everyone again, and hopefully Mr. Breivik and I were talking this morning. Hopefully we're not too far off from being able to have a live meeting again. So hopefully sometime this summer. I did want to mention a few important things going on. So first of all, we are joining the Asian American Pacific Islander community as we celebrate the Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month in May. At DWP, we recognize that there's many significant contributions that the AAPI communities have given toward the city and toward the department in particular. We currently have just under 1,900 active Asian American Pacific Islander employees here at Water and Power. It's about almost 17% of our workforce. And so it's nice to be able to recognize this group during the Special Heritage Month. We did kick off the month with posts across our many social media platforms spotlighting the occasion, and Commissioner SUSANA REYES has worked very hard with our public affairs team to put together 2 days of virtual presentations and events coming up next week. I believe they're scheduled right now for next Tuesday and Wednesday. highlighting some of our employees and some of the things that we do here at the department and the roles that people from the AAA, members of the AAPI community play in providing water and power to the city of LA. And so we are hopefully a lot of folks will tune into that and watch and help us to celebrate the special month. Also, during the Mayor's Day of Service on May 22nd, we're encouraging our employees to volunteer for a special community cleanup day. And we're going to have our water trailer out there. Rich has a beautiful water trailer to serve fresh, cold tap water to everyone, and make it a day, a special day to celebrate the Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, as well as serve the community and have a presence out there. And we will present more information to all of our employees as events continue to develop, as well as to the board members. And we look forward to seeing you involved as much as you can with those events. I know Commissioner Reyes will have a special role to play, and we thank her for her leadership in this area. I did want to mention that we had a nice recognition from the Electric Power Research Institute, EPRI. They recognized a number of our employees who were involved with their research methodology called the Strategic Land Holding Analysis, and we received the 2021 Technology Transfer Award. And so what happened was our staff was able to identify and prioritize water and power land parcels within LA County to meet certain goals, including supporting habitat and biodiversity beyond just mere compliance obligations, including opportunities for stakeholder education and awareness about urban ecosystems and exploring pollinator habitats. So they use this EPRI methodology to really catalog our properties and to bridge a gap, and so really for environmental benefit in the LA County area. And our staff are Mario Acevedo, Guy Lammers, Raynon Ledesma, Ryan McDaniel, Helen Oliveras, Graham Peace, Mark Solakchek, Maria Sasson Roses, Nancy Sutley, and Julie Van Wagner were all recognized as being part of this accomplishment. So it's nice to be recognized by EPRI and to be able to do something that was different than straight water and power, something having to do with our land holdings and fitting the environment. I did also want to note that we had a special recognition for our NSBE chapter, that's the National Society of Black Engineers. They had their 47th annual convention during the week of April 5th. We participated with Career Fair. We had 6 recruiters from Water and Power and from both Water and Power Systems, and they talked to 122 different people looking for jobs at our virtual booth, and trying to show an interest in getting folks to join our department here in the engineering ranks in both the Water and Power Systems. Our newly formed NSBE chapter, you may remember, I think it's about a year and a half ago, we formed the NSBE chapter here at Water and Power. It was recognized as the Region 6 Small Chapter of the Year. Congratulations. And our chapter president, Greg Reed, was recognized as a Region 6 Professional Member of the Year. So it's great that we have our new NSBE chapter, and already they're having great success and recognition, as well as continuing to play an active role in outreaching for future engineers to work at the Department of Water and Power. Yesterday, there was some good news coming from the governor's office about funding for debt relief. We know we've heard a lot of folks from the public come to talk about managing utility debt and debt relief. And next board meeting, there will be a presentation on how we're looking at merging debt relief opportunities, as well as going back to more business as usual, where we're starting to begin collections and shutoffs at the end of September, as we discussed, as the economy starts to recover, so we can get a little more back to normal operations. This is a very fluid, evolving area. Nancy would like to give, I'd like her to give a brief summary of what we learned yesterday, which at this point is increasingly good news. So Nancy, do you want to give us a little information for the board on what happened yesterday at the state?
Sure, thanks. So you may recall at the last meeting, we talked about $1 billion in utility debt relief for public agencies for both water and power through the Senate Budget Committee. Yesterday, the governor had a press conference talking about the state surplus. The state is a $75 billion budget surplus, as well as $26 billion that's coming from the federal government from the American Rescue Plan. And so as part of that, he announced that they would be proposing $2 billion overall for gas, water, and electric utility bill relief, which would cover both the publicly owned agencies and the investor-owned utilities. And of that amount, $1 billion would be set aside for water utility bill relief. We expect to see some additional detail on Friday when the governor releases the May revision to the budget. And then we are working with our publicly owned utility colleagues in Sacramento on the details, on proposing details on how these programs would be implemented, which we would expect to see in a budget trailer bill, which will accompany the budget. So in additional sort of good news was that the Assembly, both the budget chairs of the Senate and the Assembly were with the governor yesterday. So I think indicating support from the Assembly, which had not, highlighted this in any of their discussions. So we're expecting to continue to work with folks in Sacramento to ensure that this gets into the final budget and work on the trailer bill language. We also have we expect the council to adopt a resolution supporting this this week. So we'll continue to work on that and on the details of this utility bill relief. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Nancy. So just very lastly, just wanted to let the board know that next board meeting, I will be bringing back details regarding getting back to normal at the workplace, returning our telecommuters back to a higher level of presence here at the department. And so that work is ongoing, and we are continuing to work on the details. That, again, is an area that is very fluid because standards for being in office places and all public places continue to change. There were changes as recently as last weekend, and we know there's some upcoming changes before the next board meeting. So that's a fluid area. We're working with.
Marty?
Yes.
We have a hard out at 2:00 today.
Right, okay.
So,
Right. So I'm just
yes,
so anyway, so I just want to let you know that work is ongoing, and we are continuing to offer test kits to employees and reminding all employees that we have vaccines available that we can send folks to, and that we continue to do that. So with that, I just want to again recognize our Asian American Pacific Islander employees and thank them for their contributions and congratulate our environmental and real estate and water and power folks on their award, as well as our NSBE chapter for doing a great job and the reward that they received as well. Thank you.
that's terrific, and we look forward to your report on return to work. Are there any questions from commissioners regarding the general manager's report or on any other item that commissioners would like to speak to at this point? Seeing none, there are no motions to be introduced for future consideration. Comments from the ratepayer advocate on agendized items. Dr. Pickle, do you have a comment at this time, or will you wait for some other point in the meeting?
I will wait for other points in the meeting.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And Madam Secretary, do we have anything from neighborhood councils?
No community impact statements or formal positions were filed by any neighborhood councils on the items on today's agenda. Is she on mute? You want me? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Are there any items that are being called special in advance of the vote on the consent calendar? Seeing none and no indication, I'd like a motion to approve items 10 through 21.
So moved.
Seconded.
Terrific. Would you call the roll?
Sure. President McCLAIN-HILL?
Aye.
Vice President Reyes?
Aye.
Commissioner BARAD?
Aye.
Commissioner LEHRER?
Aye.
Commissioner Neiman Brady.
Aye.
5 ayes.
Terrific. Thank you for that. The consent calendar is passed, and we will now go to presentations of management reports, starting with A, 8A. And just in advance of this presentation, we will be looking to, there are a couple of just items that we are looking as a board to monitor on a regular basis. Corporate safety, we'll be looking at biannual presentations. So I expect a corporate safety presentation next month. We had our first one late last year. With respect to EEO, we'll be looking at least an annual presentation, again, so we can understand and track trends and developments in this area. With that, who will be making this presentation?
Good morning.
Go to Renette Anderson there. Go ahead, Renette.
Oh, thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. I am Renette Anderson, and I am the Director of Equal Employment Opportunity Services. We have this presentation this morning is organized into 5 sections. Steve, next slide. Who we are, where we were, what have we done, how do we move forward, complaint statistics and trends. Next slide, Steve. Who are we? At EEOS, we believe our responsibilities define who we are. Next slide, Steve. The following is a summary of the scope and responsibilities of our office. We are advocates for equal employment opportunity. We serve as neutral fact finders for investigations. We serve as expert witness. We provide litigation support. We develop and implement EEO department policies. Next slide, Steve. We are liaisons between the LADWP and external agencies such as the City of Los Angeles Office of Workplace Equity, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is federal, and the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, state, to assist in investigation of complaints. We develop and implement department-wide training, and we counsel and advise division management on EEO and sensitive matters. Next slide, Steve. Where we were. We want the board to know how far we have come as an organization. In 1994, the Los Angeles Times reported that 98 sexual harassment cases had occurred at LADWP within the previous 2 years. At the time, the department had 10,807 employees, 76% male and 24 female. In regards to changing the attitude of sexual harassment that existed in the department, former board commissioner Dennis Tito said, "It's like turning an oil tanker around." And you know how to turn an oil tanker around is very slow. In 2007, the department adopted the Los Angeles Department Workplace Equal Employment Opportunity, Anti-Discrimination, and Zero Tolerance Policy. Since 2010, we have received an average of 9 sexual harassment complaints per year, the majority of which do not rise to the legal threshold. The department now currently has 11,282 employees, of which 78% are male and 22% female. Next slide. What have we done? When I came to the department in 2002, these are some of the accomplishments. Next slide, Steve. We have given EEO training because at the time that I arrived here, there was very little training that was done. The EEO training was given to educate our leads, supervisors, managers, and administrators on EEO laws and how to prevent and correct discrimination in the workplace. Sexual harassment under AB 1825 legally mandates that all supervisory employees are provided at least 2 hours of effective training every 2 years. In 2005, we developed the first EEO case management system. Diversity training was given to increase the participants' cultural awareness, knowledge, and communication. Our training is given in small groups, up to 40 or 45 persons per class. It is interactive and instructor-led. Next slide. In 2007, we developed the zero tolerance policy. 2016, we testified before the EEOC, Federal Agency on Harassment in the Workplace. 2017, mandatory sexual harassment began for all of our employees, not just supervisors and managers, but the rank and file. 2019, we developed a culture of mutual respect marketing campaign with public affairs. 2020, we implemented a culture of mutual respect training in coordination with this campaign. Next slide. The zero tolerance policy, as I mentioned a while ago, there are few accomplishments I would like to talk about in further detail. One of those is the zero tolerance policy.
Ms. Renee, can you tell me how long the presentation is going to last? Because I do want to get to the stats.
Okay, well, I can skip. The stats are at the last. So if all of you are in agreement, I can go right to the stats.
Oh, no, you can move through your slides. I was just interested in
okay, well, I'll try to be very brief in the slides. Okay, but I would think a commissioner, it would probably be a half an hour. Now, if you want it less, I can do less.
Just a little less would be great.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Let me just finish the zero tolerance policy because I do feel that it's important for you to know exactly what it does. It provides the basis for enforcement of EEO findings. The zero tolerance lower threshold prevents discrimination from escalating to the level of illegal conduct under state or federal law. In essence, what this policy does, it stops the behavior before it reaches state or federal. Let's just go then to slide 13, Steve, which would be a culture of mutual respect training. The training this is the training that we're now conducting, and we have created, this is created around the marketing campaign. We have polling elements in there as well. The training will be expanded from non-supervisory to all the rank and file in August of 2021. Next slide, Steve. A culture of mutual respect training poll, the overall value of the training. This data was collected during the training. The data shows that the majority of our employees rate the training as excellent, as you can see on the next slide. We will then go to the next slide, a culture of mutual respect, EEO roles and responsibility. An extraordinary leap in understanding occurs when supervisors take this training. As you can see, before the training, it was 8%, and then there was an increase up to 38. Next slide, Steve. A culture of mutual respect. What do supervisors need? We use this poll to give us feedback from our supervisors from training to help us to understand what they needed. The greatest need expressed by supervisors is greater communications of the zero tolerance policy. Next slide, Steve. And then move on then to the next slide. How do we move forward? We believe the ability to move forward is defined by our future initiatives. There are 3 future initiatives we're looking at. Next slide, Steve. Outreach programs for increased awareness and understanding of the zero tolerance policy, a new case management system, a culture of mutual respect, marketing campaign, training and marketing campaign. Next slide, Steve. Outreach is a new key element being developed, and you can see for yourself, we're going to create a task force to review department complaint procedures and improve confidentiality of the EEO process. We're going to institute a new pilot project at field offices with high numbers of complaints by providing a presence of EEO in that particular yard. Work with labor and management to add EEO curriculum to the various trainee and apprenticeship programs. Next slide, Steve. Case management system, which it speaks for itself. Next slide, Steve. A culture of mutual respect campaign. That is what is now being rolled out at this time. And we also hope to have all of our employees enrolled in the second half of this by August of 21. Next slide, Steve.
Just before we get here, could you do me a favor? Could you go back, I think, to slide 16?
Yes.
Right. No, I'm sorry. Right there. Can you tell me the supervisors and managers that this data is based on? What was the pool? Because I'm curious. It says when you look at the outcome, it says supervisors trained between August 20 and March 2021. 38% indicated that they would benefit from greater communication of the zero tolerance policy. Another 33% more consistency implementing discipline, and 27% more support from higher level supervisors. I mean, those are 3 pretty, I mean, taken to that I'm curious about how many people were polled and how many people received this training.
Okay, first of all, there were 53 WebEx classes, of which 2,065 supervisors were polled.
Okay, great.
Right.
And you know, and approximately a third of them thought that more consistency implementing discipline would be was important or needed.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
And then if you look further, even at the 27%, they needed more support from higher level supervisors. These were some of the leads.
Okay, no, thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right. All right, we're going to move into the complaint statistics and trends. Okay. Next slide, Steve. Now we would like to take some time to go over the specific complaint statistics and trends. We will be using a 10-year average from 2010 to 2019, as well as 2020 data, current data, and annual trends for each of the protected categories. Now, on this slide, this is the terminology. We're going to be using a lot of this as we go forward in the presentation from here on out. That's the allegation, the basis, the complaints, internal complaints, external complaints, and zero tolerance. So if you need to go back, we need further explanation, you can ask. Okay, next slide, Steve. Allegations filed in 2020 by basis. First and foremost, this chart shows the distribution of EEO allegations at LADWP. Race and retaliations are the most frequently filed complaints, followed by disability and medical condition, ancestry, national origin, age, color, gender, sexual harassment, hazing, religion, sexual orientation, marital status, and veteran status. Next slide. Now we would like to present our current caseload as of the first quarter of this year. The following provides an idea of the flow of complaints through our office. From January 1 through March 31st, 2021, we had 28 new complaints. 33 complaints were closed. At the end of the quarter, March 31st.
Excuse me. May I ask a question about the two prior slides? I was trying to see if there were definitions. What is an allegation of retaliation? How do you define that?
Well, we define allegation of retaliation under the zero tolerance policy. And what basically is pretty much the same definition that the EEOC uses. Pretty much is an isolated and non-serious annoyances, which is petty sites, and they do not rise to the level of state or federal law. But yet and still, they don't rise to the level of federal or state law, but it could violate the zero tolerance policy.
Forgive me, I still remain a little bit confused. So someone has made some sort of statement, and they feel like as a result of that statement, there is retaliation against them. And so that's showing up in the retaliation bucket. Is that correct? And if that's the case, is their initial statement already being counted in one of these others?
Yes.
So is it a kind of a double, I don't want to say double counting, but is it appearing twice then?
Yes, it could. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so of
example, I mean, I too want to understand I too want to understand what you would call an example of retaliation would be helpful, I think.
Let's see. I'm trying to see. Okay, one example would be retaliation for having filed a previous complaint. That we get a lot of that. Retaliation for filing a previous EEO complaint.
Okay, so I'm not saying this is complete, but it's possible that a lot of the retaliation are kind of a repeat.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I wonder, it might be helpful when you show this again next year to actually pull that out and determine if it's a unique or if it's a kind of repeat situation, because I think that is also informative of the type of things that if there is retaliation, what are they around? What is the kind of the repeat of or potentially unaddressed areas?
Okay.
Because my hope is that with some of the ones that are on here, that a lot of them are getting addressed, but maybe there's a sentiment that some are not getting addressed, or that they're getting addressed and then getting addressed in a way that's punitive to the employee.
well, all of our complaints are addressed. However, certain ones, if there is no EEO nexus, those complaints are sent back to the division as non-EEO. So there is a possibility that that a retaliation could go back to the division as having no EEO nexus, and the division is then responsible for the actual investigation of that non-EEO complaint.
Okay.
Okay.
And then
I'm wondering how you differentiate between color and race. Are they the same thing or different? You've got color 8% and race 17%.
They are different bases. These are the bases that set forth by the EEOC and the DFEH, both federal and state agencies.
Well, can you speak a little bit more then of what you mean by an allegation based on color and one based on race?
Okay, one that is based on race is whereas you are, okay, you're Hispanic, Black, American Indian, Filipino, Asian, what are the other ones? Basically, those are what we'll be talking about. American Indian, but color is can be the same as race.
Yeah, I guess what we're trying to understand is what is the distinction? So when would, what would cause something to be considered an allegation that was based on color as opposed to being put in the race category?
Let me see. Okay, I think that you basically would be looking at the coloring of their skin, whether or not the skin was white or whether or not it was a dark skin. That would be that would be color. So it would be and sometimes it could be the shade of the skin within the same race.
I understand, since I happen to be a Latina, but I'm white and freckled. You know, people question what I am. So I'm just, I understand the nuance that Ronette is trying to describe, which is basically the color of the skin. And obviously it's much deeper and more complicated with some races, you know, the way people are dealt with a very dark African-American person versus a much lighter, you know, presents a different reaction or you know, so it's an interesting differentiation for sure.
Okay, well, thank you.
So then I have one last question about that slide. Just have you parsed this information based on water, power, and then kind of the other groups? And I'm just curious if there are any. I see you have a lot of slicing of the information throughout the materials, but it has what I'm hopeful, at least, is that there's no one area that is predominantly the source of these. And there's no way to glean that from the data that that you have in these materials. You may have the data, but it's not indicative.
Well, all of the allegations here come from our complaints, and all of the complaints are within the DWP, and they are from all over. As we get further into the presentation, you can see exactly where some of these complaints came out of. We do not have them broken down by the you know, the allegations or the basis, but we do have them broken down by the appointed, you know, whether or not it's in power or whether or not it's under the CAO or whether or not it's under the water, etc.
Okay, so if that's elsewhere in the slides, then we should probably, let's move forward and find it there. Because I think that's all that the commissioner's looking for. So we'll see it as we move forward.
Okay, great. Where are we? Okay. I believe we were under complaint statistics and trends. Steve, where were we? Where did we leave off? Slide 27, Steve. This slide shows the number of complaints filed on average from 2010 to 2019 versus the 2020 actual. This slide shows the number of complaints versus the complaints that have been filed. The data is sorted into the divisions each executive manager is responsible for. As you can see, power construction, maintenance, and operations has the most complaints filed, followed by the CAO and customer service and external affairs. The water system and customer service has lower complaints in 2020 than average over the last 10 years. Slide 28. Ratio of complaints filed to number of employees by division system from 2010 to 2019 and 2020. While the number of complaints is important to know, the proportion of the complaints to employees is helpful to see where the greatest concentration of complaints can be found. The greatest concentration is found in the division under the general manager. But because this is a very small number of employees, it can be skewed by a small number of complaints. The second greatest concentration can be found under the CAO, while the third is power, construction, maintenance, and operation. Complaint concentration is increasing in power, construction, maintenance, and operations. The number of employees there is 4,735, while it is decreasing in water, which has 128 employees, and customer service and sustainability, 1,169. Next slide. Number of allegations by basis. 2010, 2019 average versus 2020. This slide shows the number of allegations filed on average, and it is important to note that complaints often contain multiple allegations. So this is not the number of complaints filed. It is the number of allegations contained within the complaint. As you can see, race and retaliation complaints were much higher last year than they were on average over the last 10 years. Age complaints, as well as ancestry, national origin, and color complaints were also much higher last year than they were on average over the last 10 years. Next slide. Race of LADWP's workforce as of 12/31 of 20. To provide some context for the data to follow, please note the chart detailing the racial makeup of the department. The majority of LADWP employees are Hispanic, followed by Caucasian, Asian, and Filipino, Black, and American Indian. Next slide, please. There were 969 complaints filed at LADWP by complainants' race from 2010 to 2019. This slide shows the amount of complaints filed by race. As you can see, there is a similar amount of complaints filed by Caucasians, Hispanic, and Black employees, although there is not a similar makeup of these departments, of these employees at the department. Next slide, please. Excuse me, this slide shows the number of complaints filed on average from 2010 to 2019. This slide shows the distribution of complaints by race as compared to the racial makeup. Black employees filed 27% of complaints, 263, and accounts for 14% of the employees. Hispanic employees filed 26%, 26% of complaints, 255, and account for 37% of employees. Caucasian employees filed 25% of complaints, 248, and account for 30% of the employees. Asian employees filed 11% of complaints, 109, and account for 5% of the employees. American Indians employees filed 1% of complaints, which are 8, and account for 0.5 of employees. Next slide, please. This slide shows the amount of race allegations from 2010 to 2019 by complainants' race. The majority of race allegations are filed by Black employees, followed by Hispanics, then Caucasian, and Asian and Filipino. Next slide, please. The information on this slide details the race allegations filed as compared with the racial makeup. Black employees filed 50% of race complaints, which is 115, and accounts for 14% of the employees. Hispanic employees filed 20% of race complaints.
Renette, rather than, let me pause you from reading this slide. And can you help me with what is the trend really over this 10-year period? Is it getting worse or is it getting better? In other words, are there more? Because the prior slide just showed us the number, and the breakdown. These are some interesting percentages, but what I don't see is, are we improving? And is less reporting actually an indication of improvement, or is it an indication of people not? I'm not sure. I'm trying to figure out takeaways here and what is actionable for us.
Well, we get off into the latter part, which I believe is in a couple of slides over, where we absolutely can see what the trends are. Where are the trends on here?
36 maybe? Oh, well, it's my 36. I don't know where. Yeah.
Yes, here it is. All right. So we are. All right. So we're looking at 36. There has been an increase of these allegations over the last few years, and especially drastic increase in race complaints, reaching a high of 42 in 2019. The trend of these allegations is related, as complaints that file for race often includes allegations of color, ancestry, and national origin. So if you really look at it, the trend, I believe, for race is going up.
Okay, it seems like everything might be going up. Generally speaking, is this is generally trending up. And it doesn't seem like there's been a material change in the submission process. So it's not because people now know how to submit and before they didn't. Is that fair? So it sounds like the conditions are such that people feel like they're making more allegations.
Yes, they are.
And as you and as I sort of move forward, because you've also got trends related to gender, and
Yes.
it looks like you've included gender, sexual orientation, and sexual harassment
Yes.
as combined, and they seem to reflect the same trend.
Right. The Steve, if you could go to what it would be slide 42, Steve. Okay, 42, Steve. All right. The complaints remain relatively steady from 2012 to 2017, but they increased in 2018. Gender continued to increase in 2019, reaching a high of 25 before dropping back down in 2020. Sexual harassment spiked in 2018 with a high of 18 allegations, likely due to the success of the Me Too movement, before dropping back down to 9 a year. So it's a steady increase, but as you can see, right now, sexual harassment is back down, but it could spike up. It spikes up.
Okay. Are there additional questions about this presentation or comments?
Just to express my disappointment that we're trending in the wrong way.
Yeah, I think this is an area that we're going to want to develop a dashboard for, and both monitor and understand more deeply from management how we are addressing these issues. These numbers, coupled with our own recent reports coming from the racial equity survey, that indicated that in addition to what we see, that there are numbers of employees who've not availed themselves of the system, just suggests that we have to take very seriously culture and our operating guidelines, principles, policies, and just practices to make sure that we are effectively dealing with these matters. Would hate to be in the position of our friends, the regional water agency, and to drop the ball or to be blindsided by significant workplace issues that we're not dealing with aggressively. So we will work with EEO to ensure that we have a good dashboard with management as well, and bring this report back rather than annually, biannually, so that the board can understand how things are trending, particularly as people return to work. So are there any other questions before moving to the next item or comments?
I have a question. How are you differentiating between gender and sexual orientation?
I think there's separate reporting boxes, and so when you look at the slide on 42, Commissioner, you see blue So I assume that that is a specific complaint where the complaint was based on gender. That same complainant may have also indicated that they were being subject to sexual harassment as well. So, and you see a line, indicating where those complaints are. Although interestingly, we've got more people making just straight gender complaints than we do sexual harassment. So there may be some overlap, or they may be, completely distinct complaints. And then sexual orientation has its own line as well.
Right, right.
But obviously, we're going to want to watch and to really understand both complaints, resolution of complaints to trends. And there was early in the presentation, Renee, you indicated that among the efforts that your office would be undertaking was putting people on site in certain field offices where there may be spikes in activity as a means of both better informing people, I think, on the front end, so that we can try to mitigate complaints, but also making sure that people are aware of the services of EEO and are able to avail themselves of the systems as necessary.
I just also want to mention that on the racial equity and gender and the cases for EEO, we will be tracking them on the equity metrics as well and adding them on. So that is also a monitoring dashboard type of information.
All right.
I think that'll be helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
If I could make a brief comment, is that all right, Madam President?
Certainly.
So, as you see from Renette's data, there's a lot of information, and when we bring this back, we'll try to package it a little cleaner and simpler, because there's a lot of different facets and different ways to look at this. I look at the trends, and I do recognize a couple things. There was, as we saw from the racial equity survey, there was a lot of concern that people felt if they did say something, if they had a concern, maybe nothing would happen. So it's one of the reasons we moved the EEO office directly under me about a month or so ago, so that we could make sure that we supported it properly, and that people felt that if they had an issue, they could bring it there. And so I do think in that sense, you would see people thinking they have more of a voice, an opportunity to be heard, and so you may see an increase in complaints. At the same time, we want to continue to between the work that EEO is doing in training and the work of the Diversity and Equity Office that is about to open up, that we hope to see some marked improvement in these areas. The other aspect is a lot of things go into allegations and complaints, and so we'll need to bring you data on how many are actually substantiated. Complaints are always addressed, as Renee said. They're always looked at. Everything is investigated. It does take some time, which we're working on providing more resources to speed up that process. Sometimes there is a problem, but it's not an EEO problem, gets turned back to the division. Sometimes there is an actual EEO problem. So the number so the number of complaints that get substantiated is very important in terms of not just how many complaints are made, which is a good sign that people have a voice or feel they have a voice, but how many are actually indicate a real problem that has to be resolved. So we'll work on trying to clean this up and package it in a way that's a little easier to digest.
Good. Thank you, Marty.
I'd just like to say something in regards to substantiation. We kind of got around in different areas of the presentation today, but in the external cases for the last 11 years, they've had over 350 cases where our employees filed on the outside external agencies. And these were with the DFEH, the state, the EEOC, which is federal, and My Voice LA, which is the city of LA, as well as ODCR. And not one substantiation was made. That's a lot. 347 cases, and not one substantiation is made. we never got a chance to talk about the success of the zero tolerance policy. But that is what the zero tolerance policy has allowed us to do, is to lower the threshold of policy against state or federal laws. And so I can definitely say to you that we have not had one substantiation in the last 11 years, over 350 cases approximately from any other state or local or federal agencies, period.
Okay, so you're telling us that there have been these complaints, but not one's been valid?
Yes, they've all filed with the external agencies, 340. No, not that they're not valid. They are just not up to the level of what the threshold level is lower.
Yeah, I think what Renee's saying is that we've lowered the threshold level so we could intercede at an earlier level than would actually violate state or federal law, and that's been proven out by the fact that there's been no federal state findings of any violations because we try to stop problems early on in the process.
Okay, well, thank you. We will definitely do a much deeper dive as we move forward. I think one of my other observations will be the need for a great deal more coordination, both within the department, well, just within the department, so that we have EEO as an office. We will have a new Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, training, and those kinds of things are going to need to be coordinated so we don't have people working at cross purposes or a multitude of things being pushed on employees without some strategic thinking as to when and who's leading and that sort of thing. So this has been really a very welcome first cut at this presentation, and we look forward to continuing to understand these issues and understand the department's approach to resolving these issues and creating the most equitable, fair, and welcoming workplace possible for all of our employees. So thank you. And with that, we will move to 8B. And who will be offering that presentation?
Good morning, Commissioner Ann Santilli, Chief Financial Officer, and I'm joined by John Chen, the Director of Corporate Performance. So we wanted to give an update on our equity metrics data initiative outreach and proposed changes. So the next slide. As a reminder, our services are currently distributed equally to all customers, but customers have different needs. And equity for utilities offering services and programs that consider the customer's needs, ensuring fair and just impartial service. Next slide. So as a reminder, back in 2016, the department adopted the Equity Metrics Data Initiative resolution and asked us to start tracking and reporting on equity metrics. And we developed a framework to help ensure we're providing fair services to all ratepayers. But this last October, the board asked us to take a deeper dive and to enhance the metrics by working with internal and external stakeholders and review and expand the current metrics with specific strategies as they relate to baseline, short-term and midterm and long-term performance goals. Next slide. So these are our current 15 equity metrics that we have now. We have 4 on water and power infrastructure investments to help us ensure we're doing things equitably. We have an additional amount on our customer service initiatives, all of our rebate programs to ensure that these are equitable. And then we have procurement initiatives for our small business and disabled veteran business programs. And then also on the employment, we track the demographics of gender and also race. The next slide. So we started out in January under the guidance of Vice President Reyes to start talking to community-based organizations on what we could do better on our equity and metrics. We invited 30 different organizations to come talk to us, and 18 accepted. We held 2 meetings on January 15th and January 22nd to review our current metrics and see what resonated with the organizations. And we also demonstrated a platform so that we could capture everybody's ideas and allow them to share what they thought we may be missing, or what made sense to them to show that we were actually tracking these initiatives. Next slide. So based on the stakeholder feedback, Commissioner Reyes provided the proposed changes in an email with everything we had taken in January. And we sent this out on April, and we met on April 21st. And the group had some proposed expansion to the metrics. And they also recommended that we adjust the dashboard so it was more helpful to them, and that we consider creating a working group to continue to look at these and include a full spectrum of our customers. After we met with the community-based organizations, we also presented the information to the Office of Public Accountability, and they also gave us feedback on maybe adding some additional metrics, and then, again, also including all customers in our outreach. So next slide. So these are the areas where the equity metrics had the most recommendations. The first one was on our rebate programs. And the idea was to create a unified common application for all customers, so that if they were able to see one program they thought they could take advantage of, then there might be other ones that could also help them reduce their bill or take advantage of programs. And the goal was to create an end-to-end application tracking so that people could see where they were, and then to look at the backlog for any items that were taking longer. So this was an area they thought would be helpful to customers. On the infrastructure, there was also the recommendation to add the customer average frequency, the customer average interruption duration index. So not just looking at how many outages we have and how long they are, but if we can hone in on customers to see how long is a customer out of service, they thought that would be a good idea. On customer billing, some proposed metrics is new metrics for number of customers currently in arrears, number of payment arrangement options, and are the current options adequate, other debt programs, and also to continue to look at project share to see if there's a way to help our low-income customers by having donations from other customers. Next slide. A big area of concern was on human resources and racial equity. The idea of new metrics for gender and racial equity in the DWP workforce, including hiring and promotions, looking at non-traditional jobs, executive level jobs. And then they wanted to understand what are our policy changes that we have made to reflect racial equity, through our interview process, promotions, mentorship programs, employee access to training. And then what are DWP's efforts on local hiring metrics? And then they also asked, what is our conversion rate from people working as a utility pre-craft trainee to becoming civil service employees? And then they also suggested metrics for a number of employee grievances, employees that have completed the mandatory EEO training requirements, new metric for racial equity training programs, and then also looking at
it seems like it got pretty granular in these conversations. I mean, one of my concerns about the current metric is it's unwieldy because it has everything, and as opposed to thinking through what you actually need to track to get to certain equity goals. And so here, I guess what I'm seeing are just a lot of, some are policy things, some are actual trackable, but it just seems very granular as opposed to, understanding what outcome we're trying to track from a metrics perspective. Because you need an outcome, and then you need to develop the appropriate metric for the outcome. So I'm just unclear how this gets us there.
This was all their ideas that they wanted us to take back. We have one more page of proposed metrics that on the next slide that look at our EV rebates and our infrastructure programs to see, are these equitable, the EV rebate processing time, because they shared with us that sometimes if it takes us too long to process things, it may deter people from signing up. And then the area was supply chain. While we look at small business and disabled veteran businesses, they also consider looking at women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, and then also looking at the number of number of suppliers that came onto the department. So the next slide. So these were all of the ones that they talked about, but they also talked about having us change our dashboard to, just as you said, equity outcomes. Each metric should have an outcome driven from it, and then the program impact. So they also recommended that we include that. Processing times to give transparency to our end-to-end processes, current backlogs, and then just also look at our overall.
I guess I understand. So I understand that we had a community, that we've been having community meetings, and that's great. I guess what I was looking for, or what I thought was happening, is that we were reviewing our current equity metrics to determine if those metrics usefully or adequately provide information that allows us to measure our practices in a way that gives us good, useful insight into into our equity goals. And so I'm just curious as to where we are in terms of getting to that result. And I understand that this data will be used to perhaps inform that end goal, but I'm curious as to where we are.
So right now they've given us, if we go to slide 11, they appreciated all of our current metrics, but they thought we could add more. Also on the rebate programs and on water conservation programs. So the last slide is really where we are. So we've been taking all this information, and what we want to do is work with program managers who are doing these roles to talk about what the groups would like to see, and do we have data and systems to support it. And I believe our new Chief Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Officer is not too far away, so we'd like to also bring this person on board to say this is what we've heard, and then communicate back with the working groups as necessary so that we can prepare a board package for a board resolution updating the metrics once we have went through the information, talk to the new chief that's going to be coming on board, and then bring back a resolution to the board for final.
Yeah, we did ask that there are many metrics that they're asking for, or data sets that they're asking for, and we need to prioritize and really look at the top ones that we would reasonably, aligning with our goals and the outcomes that we desire. So that is the meeting that corporate performance is going to have with the program managers and hashing that out.
Yeah, I guess my my comment is that there's a huge difference between data and a metric. At least in my way of thinking, because in my way of thinking, if you're talking about metrics, you have some outcome. Otherwise, you can have all kinds of data and you can track everything in the world, but if you're actually looking at metrics, that metric is tied to some particular outcome, and it's backwards to go to data first versus outcome first. And so that's, I guess it seems like we've gone away from, or at least I haven't seen, and what I'm not hearing or understanding is the work that we are doing internally to determine what we think should be tracked from a policy perspective, what we think should be tracked in order to provide good transparency and a good way of monitoring our progress towards specific outcomes or goals. And in my mind, in the same way that the department can be incredibly specific and very thoughtful and bring a great deal of expertise to creating plans that and steps toward specific outcomes as it relates to other things that we are doing. I'm looking for the department to be equally engaged in a substantive way with substantive expertise around identifying what the metrics are that we should be tracking in order to achieve our stated equity goals. And that's very different than just doing outreach, getting feedback, and then being responsive to the feedback, because not all of the feedback needs to sit here. Some of that, there are lots of different things, again, and lots of different data sets that people may be interested in. And how they get that feedback in those data sets may not be through the equity metrics.
And when we come back, we were going to revise our dashboard so that the goal is actually there and so that it is measurable, but we wanted to at least share the input that we have received, and we will work with the new chief coming on board and with the divisions, because a lot of them actually focused around things we already have, like the rebate program, the EV, but really the human resources side, the racial and gender equity was something that I think was the most eye-opening, that people wanted the most insight into.
Okay, well, I will be interested in seeing the department's cut on this as well. So I look forward to the next report.
Thank you, and thank you to Vice President Reyes for helping us so much. You were instrumental in bringing everybody together. And that concludes our report.
I have a couple comments. I would like to know, please, what organizations were included, because they're, I'm involved on several nonprofits and larger environmental organizations, and I just want to track who ended up participating. That would be important to me. The other is that I think there's one is services, to the public or to our ratepayers, and the other is the department. And so I think there's a little where President McCLAIN-HILL was getting to is like a little, you're first talking about, is everybody being able to take advantage of some of the programs, and how equitable is that, that whole sort of process of delivering the services and the opportunities, as opposed to within the department, how the department is functioning. And finally, in as much as all these meetings were, I guess it's a question, but it was all the information in terms of participation delivered by email, and did people have to have computers to be able to participate meaningfully?
Yes, Commissioner, all the meetings were held during the pandemic, so we did have Zoom meetings, and we had a facilitator to break out the groups. And I don't have the list right in front of me, but I can send you the list of the 30 organizations that were invited and the 18 that did participate. Okay.
I'd like to track whether the ones that didn't, partly was because they didn't have access. And just being around some of these communities, I could tell you, it's pretty surprising, but real. So we've been, I think it's a good conversation to have, where people could borrow maybe little iPads or something. Let's talk about that a little more, because thank you very much. And thank you for the hard work, all of you, and Commissioner Reyes.
You're welcome.
Are there any other comments? Okay, well, we will continue. So I look forward to continuing this effort. And in addition to Commissioner Reyes, do appreciate the significant time and energy that CBOs have been putting into working with us on this project. So thank you all for that. We're now going to, it's 11:30. Which would be early for a break for us, but I want to be thoughtful about where we are in the agenda, and we've got two additional significant presentations. Would now be a good time to take a quick coffee break or bathroom break, or are folks maybe pausing for 10 minutes, coming back at 11:40? Does that work?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Then we're going to take a break in the meeting. Council, do you need to make a statement?
At this time, we are in recess, and we will resume at 11:40 or soon thereafter as a quorum is present.
Thank you.
We are in recess.
Please remain silent. and we take roll.
Perfect. Yes, that's what I mean by restart.
All right.
We are recording.
Okay.
Let me take roll. President McCLAIN-HILL,
Present.
Vice President Reyes,
Present.
Commissioner BARAD, Commissioner NEEMAN BRADY, Commissioner LEHRER.
Present.
3 members present and a quorum.
Thank you. We're next doing our power system reliability program report for fiscal year, 1920 and 2021 update. Who's making this presentation?
Rico, you gonna kick that off or we go straight to Jason?
Marty, are you ready to go? It looks like your power system's AWOL.
Yes, let me find the experts because they should do a much better job of this than I will. But
Hey, Marty, this is Brian.
So, commissioners, we will have
there we go. Thank you, Andy.
Now we got everybody.
David Hansen and Vince Sabukovic will be presenting on this for power system.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Hi there, Nicole's here. I'm just going to be on off of video for a second, but I'm still here.
Terrific. We're ready to start, Andy.
All right. Good morning, Board of Water Power Commissioners. Dave and I are excited to be presenting the reliability program updates for last fiscal year as well as the current fiscal year. LADWP has had to encounter numerous challenges, not only to meet very aggressive targets, but also to deal with the pandemic situation, and we'll talk about that later in the presentation. In addition, LADWP is making adaptations to move ourselves toward a carbon-free future based on the 2035 carbon-free targets. And so one of the things we wanted to mention was that one of the LA 100 study did provide a framework for the Clean Grid LA plan that looks at incorporating various resources to help us achieve those goals. One assumption that it made, though, was that all the overloads on the distribution and the transmission system that were identified prior to the study being completed were already addressed. This is an important distinction because the projects that were not included in the study will still require various resources in order to address the situation. Therefore, the Power System Reliability Program is of paramount importance to help us to take the first step toward addressing these overloads and also preparing ourselves for the carbon-free 2035 future. Next slide, please. So LADWP initiated this program back in 2007 after numerous transformer outages in 2006, 2000, and early 2007, where our customers were without power for some quite extended period of time during heat storm events. This program initially included only distribution assets, such as the transformers, poles, cables, and cross arms. Later on, we expanded that program in 2014 to include the power system as a whole. So we look to address generation assets, transmission, and substation as well. This proactive program is really essential to ensuring our customers are receiving reliable service by addressing assets and replacing them before the end of their useful life. We also look at improving our processes and utilizing newer materials to extend potential lifetime of various assets across the system. And in addition to that, we hope to instill and involve very aggressive inspection and maintenance programs to proactively identify problematic pieces of equipment and replace them before they do fail. LADWP also seeks to look at various technologies and incorporate some of the modernization that other parts of the power system, including our distributed automation program, has allowed us to look at ways to improve some of our circuits that are not performing to the standards that we set. Next slide. So LADWP did encounter a very challenging year in late last fiscal year, starting the last quarter really of beginning in March, where we had to deal with the pandemic, as many across the world had to experience. LADWP had to establish various protocols to ensure safety to not only their employees, but to the public. We instilled physical distancing requirements, as well as worked with crews on various assignments and prioritization, and also utilize new PPE requirements, such as the wearing of masks, along with their other PPE to keep our workers safe. In late summer of 2020, we also experienced a large number of outages due to extreme heat events in both August and September. And not only did our LADWP staff and field and office personnel have to take the precautions for COVID protocols, but we also had to, our field crews had to deal with high temperatures and take preventative measures to guard against heat exhaustion and dehydration. LADWP had to work long hours into the night to restore service to our customers. And this was an important action that we took to ensure that our customers will continue to get the reliable service that they deserve. LADWP also worked closely together with both field and office personnel to prioritize work, especially those that have the greatest impact on our customers, and also ensure worker safety to meet our PSRP goals and objectives. And now I'll turn it over to Dave to discuss some of our last year's accomplishments and our targets.
Good morning, members of the board, Madam President. Next slide, please. PSRP targets for 1920. This is our overall summary on what our targets were, starting from the top to the bottom in generation. We have some detailed slides to break out these individual numbers and what were accomplished. You can see on the actuals there for generation, they're still ongoing. We had some delays, but we do plan to finish those up soon. You can see the numbers from left to right, targets and actuals, everything is looking pretty good. We had some different numbers than what we had expected on the circuit breakers under equipment life extensions, but we'll go into that a little detail on the substation slide. Next slide, please. So first off, the budget, of course, the goal is to stay less than 15, plus or minus 15%. And currently, well, for fiscal 1920, we're at 6% under. Capital expenditures were less than 10% of the approved budget, and operations was less than 5%, which showed both effective budgeting and use of the resources. The total expenditures were well below targeted rate case metrics as field and office personnel worked diligently to achieve our fiscal year targets. Next slide, please. So for generation, there's the detail projects that we had planned on completing in 1920. So 2 major inspections, and we plan to finish those up later in this fiscal year for thermal and for pump storage generators. Also, rotational work assignments impacted our construction schedules. I know at this point everybody's getting a little COVID fatigue, just sick of even talking about it. But in 1920, it definitely had a hard impact on what we were trying to accomplish. Next slide, please. So for transmission, we had 2 circuits planned on the 138 kV underground, and we got one of them. Scattergood Airport Line 2 was upgraded to 230 kV. Now, this involved a large rerouting of conduit along Aviation Boulevard for the Landside Access Modernization Program, LAMP. The Fairfax Airport Line 2 was moved to this fiscal year. We get a narrow window by the Energy Control Center on when we can perform this work. And if we don't think we can finish it, we don't start it. And we had some issues with contractors and again, COVID. So, but we did exceed our maintenance hole restraints by 1. Woo-hoo. All right, next slide, please. So on the substation side, 2 receiving station and 2 switching station transformers. So 4 total was the plan, and we got 1 for fiscal 1920. The distribution transformers, the goal was 21. They hit 15. And we track this per can. You'll see that on some of the lists, what that means in some of the stations. I'm sorry.
Can you remind me when you effectively resumed, I don't want to say normal operations, but really active out in the field projects? I mean, there was a period of not, but when did that recommence?
So it's funny, doing my homework for this was March 10th. Of last year, and I think the next day we all got caught up in a mass exposure out at Truesdale, which put a lot of us off for 14-day quarantine, and then we started to try to wrap our head around what was going on. The COOP plan started rolling out, so March we were in full swing of reaction, and then we started to have civil unrest issues just when we had got our heads wrapped around what the impact was from COVID. So I would say mid to late summer was where we started really getting back to our planned targets, which of course would be after the end of the fiscal year. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
So on the substation side, they've adopted the resiliency model in the last couple of years where they prioritize the equipment that had caused the previous year outages or issues during the heat wave. So once we weather the storm after the 4th of July weekend, they take a look at all the equipment, do some oil samples, and they identify the frequent offender, the usual suspects. And then those pieces of equipment, circuit breakers and distribution transformers, are targeted for replacement during the following spring on into the summer, with again the deadline being the 4th of July weekend. So as I said earlier, right when that hit, we rolled from COVID to civil unrest, so it threw our resiliency targets off. And this 21 distribution station transformers, we do track it per can, and what we mean by that is some transformers have all 3 phases in the same piece of equipment. Other stations have an individual separate transformer for each phase. So if we change out a 3-phase bank, we count that as 1. If we change out a single phase per, or single can per phase, we count that as 3. Next slide, please. So on the distribution side of the house, this is the largest number of power system assets. You can see a picture there, changing out a pole top can, a station wash, and some cable. This utilizes in-house employees as well as our contract crews to replace the aging equipment. Next slide. So our overall goals on the distribution side of the house, I'm pretty sure the board's familiar with this slide. So for 1920, you can see poles. Our target was 4,000. We replaced 4,033 planned pole replacements. Overall, 4,641 because of new business, system growth, failure. So essentially everything above on the overall column is the unplanned work, but it still counts towards that metric. You can see for underground cables, cross arms, everything was exceeded for our targets. On the transformer side, definitely exceeded, but we had a huge heat wave during that year, so that resulted in a lot of transformer changeouts. Next slide. All right.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So LADWP, of course, measures the success of this program by taking a look at our reliability indices and comparing that to other neighboring utilities of similar size. So one of the first indices we look at is our frequency of outages, which is our safety statistic, and this is measuring the frequency of outages across the whole customer base, all 1.4 million electric customers. We compare ourselves to the investor-owned utilities such as SCE, PG&E, and SDG&E. LADWP performed exceedingly well, actually scoring in the first quartile, falling into the first quartile or below the first quartile for all investor-owned utilities, not only in California, but across the United States. LADWP continues to seek to address some of the major events that cause some of these outages, but a lot of times those jobs are also compared as part of the major event days. So the hatched area that you see on the screen, the blue hatched area, includes those major event days. So an example of a major event day that we had in 2019-2020 fiscal year was the April 9th windstorm. And during that time, we had over 100 outages spread across the system. So crews were spread very thin to address those outages and restore power to the customers. Next slide.
What is the band there? The shading? Sorry.
Oh, the hatched area includes the major event days.
Oh, okay.
So this includes
You're
like when you have,
normalizing it by removing them.
exactly.
Can I ask a quick question, clarification on that last slide? On the major event days, I know that the SCE and PG&E have the power shutoffs for high wind days. So do those hashed areas include in their shutoff power intentionally to avoid a liability issue, or are these actual outages they had not reflecting how many people actually were shut off?
I'll have to get back to you on that one because I have to look at the statistics that the other utilities had. But I believe in the next slide I'll show you that PG&E had one due to the power shutoff, which really exceeded the SAIDI figure. So, but I'll get back to you on the other outages for the major event days on the other utilities.
And when we do the comparison, it's not really an apples to apples, right? Because our situation is a lot different from like the PG&E where they're in different locations. Our location is more here. We're not that subject to like wildfires or anything like that. Has that been considered? Yeah, so the territory and the topography that LADWP has it can be different. Obviously, PG&E has a much larger service territory, and they do have a lot of exposure to wildfire activities. And LADWP also has certain portions of their city as part of the wildfire areas as well. So we take measures to mitigate those hazards as well. So, but you're right, in some cases we have a much more urban environment than wildlife and trees and things of that nature. Okay. So the reliability indices, another one we look at is our duration. Again, this is the total number of minutes divided by the total number of customers. And LADWP seeks to continue to reduce this number, and it's really an indication of how quickly we can restore power to the average customer. And so in this particular case, our numbers slightly increased, but have remained relatively stabilized across the last 3 years. And again, one of the major event days that we experienced here was the windstorm, and that accounted for roughly, excuse me 1 moment, it accounted for roughly 13% of all outage minutes. And so that's a slight increase, but as I mentioned before, PG&E had these power system shut off activities that increased that duration to much longer to prevent potential forest fire ignitions. Next slide. Additional statistic we look at is the customer average interruption duration index. And this really tells you how many minutes
a customer that experiences an actual outage was out for. In this particular case, LADWP continues to show a decrease in this number in terms of when you include the major event days, and a relatively stable performance when you do the exclusion of these major event days. But when you do include the major event days, such as the windstorm, we did have wind speeds reach up to 50 miles per hour in our coastal and mountain areas. And in that case, this caused an KD of 366 minutes on that particular day, which is 2.3 times, or just over 2 times the number of outage minutes that a customer experiencing outage experienced. So we do see quite a big impact from these major event days and storm events. Okay, next slide, please.
How do we take away from Katie and Sadie? Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Please continue.
How do we relate the two? So the difference is how long the system was out versus how long an actual customer was out. And so we're to glean from that, and these are obviously longer in duration than the Sadie is. So are we to glean that this is an indication of our responsiveness, or how long it takes to trickle down to the customer? What are we supposed to interpret between the two?
So one of the things we interpret between the two is our ability to have the staff available to respond to those events. We are doing active inspection and maintenance programs and looking at other technology to restore power quicker. So the distributed automation program, for example, is one of the things we're looking at and implementing in a pilot program. In addition, we look at, in major event days, restoring power to a particular customer would take longer if there's more crews dispatched. So we look at how these crews are responding. So it is a measure of how quickly we can respond to those events and restore power. So one of the things we do is, for example, upgrade equipment as necessary to prevent prolonged outages, and do inspection and maintenance programs to address those issues.
This is Fred Pickle, if I may add. The safety index is really an indication of how well the system is designed to withstand problems. The Katie index, as has been noted, is an indication of your staffing levels and your ability to address specific problems when they occur. So in periods of extreme events, it's how many people can you muster to put on the job and reduce the time individual customers who are out are out.
But also, I mean, does this consider potentially customer service intake of these? So, I mean, I'm not trying to find a place to put blame, but or say where the concern is, but I'm just trying to understand: is this an indication of the whole company-wide responsiveness, or is this really more fine-tuned towards you've known about the incident, so then from then it moves on, so it's no longer a customer service response item? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If I could add, this is Andy. One of the issues that affects where we're a little bit different from some of the investor owns as a system where they'll have, we're 465 square miles. They range from 20,000 to 70,000 square miles. The denseness of our population as opposed to where they have pockets of big cities, the majority of our system is in a big city. So when you look at traffic, when you look at the areas of underground cables and systems we have, as opposed to the majority of their systems being overhead, The amount of time it takes to respond to an underground outage and restore as opposed to an overhead outage and restore can differ in, you know, as much as 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, that makes
So in
sense.
a lot of cases, it now distribution automation, you know, I'm excited about that. Sadly, I probably won't be here to see it all, but you know, I think that will really make a dent on our KD numbers, right? Because we'll be able to isolate things quicker, right? We'll be able to isolate outages quicker and pinpoint. Now it could take us 3 to 4 hours to actually find the location of the problem in an underground system and then make repairs. So, and with our aged infrastructure that we're working with, sometimes we can't, you know, we have a 24/7, 365 trouble section that responds to outages. And, you know, the great thing about water and power is we never leave a job with a customer out of service, which is not the case with every utility. But in cases, there are times we have to call out, you know, district crews to replace cable, which more recently has started to extend outages into the 24, 48-hour range. So that significantly impacts those numbers as well. But PSRP, you know, in the investment we're making, has really impacted that for the better. And as we keep continuing this, those numbers and those problems will decrease.
Okay, that's helpful.
Okay. All right, next slide, please. We also take a look at the Mayfie statistic to really complete the picture in terms of the frequency of outages. So the Mayfie measures the number of outages that are less than 5 minutes. And so these can create some issues for some of the industrial customers, but also can also disturb some of the other residential and commercial customers. But again, it provides a complete picture. So LADWP has done fairly well in reducing the number of momentary outages and has actually done better than 2 out of the 3 investor-owned utilities. So this is a good indication that we're also addressing the momentary outage situation through some of our programs in the through some of the replacement strategies in our power system reliability program.
This is great. I think this is a new addition to show us. I'm sure you tracked this before, but it was a new addition to show us. So I'm glad to see it because I think this is a very important one, and for me is a big indication of longer term reliability issues. So it's helpful to see.
Great, thank you. And LADWP has established these fiscal year goals for the current year. And one of the things to note is that these numbers that are shown as the actuals were completed through the end of March. So in some cases, we're ahead of what's shown here. But in this particular case, generation has made substantial accomplishments this fiscal year. And we're able to complete some of the jobs that Dave had mentioned that were in progress from the prior fiscal year. So one of the units at Castaic Power Plant, for example, was wrapped up, and another one was on its way to being finished. In addition, the transmission efforts have been performed quite well. We've actually increased the number from the previous fiscal year to 4 circuits. And we've already accomplished 75% of that target this fiscal year and are well on our way to actually replacing the number of maintenance hole restraints necessary for this particular program. Our substation assets, this one's only through February of 2021. And our substation targets were the same as last year. And we are making very good progress in our distribution circuit breaker replacement program. And we're looking to get ready for the summer by replacing some of the distributing station transformers. And this is again predicated based on capital resources available, or excuse me, capital projects that are also separate than the PSRP that are using the same resources. So in some cases, we have to prioritize work due to the available crews that are available for construction in various parts of the territory. And then in the on the distribution side, LADWP will accomplish all 5 targets for these assets that are listed here, including again, completion of over 50 miles of cable, which is quite significant. And we had to reduce, we adjusted the budgetary numbers and had to reduce the poles as a result from 4,000 to 3,500. So we will hit the 3,500 target and are, again, like I said, will meet the other goals as well for distribution assets. Okay, next slide. All right. Well, I just wanted to leave you with just a summary of some of the things we were able to accomplish. You know, we had to work through some very challenging times due to the COVID pandemic and adjusting to the new way we accomplish things, maintaining safety to our staff as well as to the public. We also continue to prioritize and maintain replacement targets for this current year. And then another thing that's important is that we have worked within available resources and budget. So we have to show our fiscal responsibility. And I think we've done that by staying within the 15% metric that Dave had mentioned. And actually we're only 6%. And markedly, over the last 4 years, we've been able to stay within that under 10% variance for all the last 4 years in our power system reliability program. Moving forward, it's important that we do analysis and continue to improve our methods for both construction as well as engineering to improve our processes and efficiencies. We also look to address some of the assets in our high fire threat zones. So one of the things we're looking at is focusing priorities on automating stations in those high fire threat zones. And so we've been able to make significant progress in those areas. And then we've also been replacing poles, old wood poles with steel poles in those high fire threat zones, increasing the spacing between the phases to prevent line-to-line incidents, and also using cover conductors to prevent physical contact with vegetation and also wildlife. So these are some of the measures we've been taking, and we continue to hope to look at how we can improve and increase capacities by replacing and upgrading assets, and also bringing in new circuits to relieve load across the power system. So that concludes our presentation. We have to answer any more questions that you may have. Oh, next slide.
I have one question. You know, I have to say that even though I've sort of been in a neighborhood that has occasionally had some loss of power, that, you know, it's been taken care of. And I live near Commissioner NEEMAN Brady, so I don't know what she would say, but I feel like we've been taken care of as a larger part of a very larger system in a way that felt efficient. I have a question, which is kind of is the use of wood poles still, you know, given, you know, sort of a sense of you know, addressing issues of the urban forest and the forest in general, is that still makes sense? Isn't there, besides metal, some other composite product that poles are being made of that is more, I don't know, resilient, if I could call it that? And obviously wood poles go up in smoke. So I'm just curious, like the materiality of these power poles.
Great question, Commissioner. We have been utilizing steel poles as well as fiberglass poles.
Oh, fiberglass.
Yeah, and also we use fiberglass cross arms when we do some of those fiberglass change outs. So that helps to improve the longevity and resistance to both the environmental conditions that you were talking about.
Okay. Although fiberglass has its environmental sort of repercussions, so it'd be interesting to know if anybody's is coming up with a, you know, because it's the fiber and the petroleum that it's, you know, is used is slightly problematic. So just I guess it's an R&D suggestion to someone out there listening to us.
Okay, we'll take that back. In fact, we have a overhead work
You can
practices.
suggest it to somebody.
Yeah, we have an overhead work practices committee and a development and standards group that does evaluations on various technologies and materials. So
yes,
we'd be glad to take that back.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, is there additional comments before we move forward to our next, to our final presentation before moving into closed session? Hearing none, if we could, thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation. If we could move forward with the Clean Grid LA plan.
Okay. I have a question regarding to what happened in Hollywood. I guess it was 2 weeks ago, underground, where I guess four of our employees were burned and brought to the hospital. And I wondered what caused that, and what are we doing in the future to prevent such accidents?
So currently, commissioners, that incident is under investigation. We're looking and studying it to determine exactly what happened that caused the fault in the underground. Once we have fully identified that, then we will, like always, we look to see if this was just an incident where our employees made a mistake, or was this an environmental issue where there was an equipment failure. And once we understand that, then we take steps. The majority of these types of accidents, and I'm not saying that was the case for this one, is really where our employees make a mistake. It's employee error, where they just didn't follow a procedure, or, you know, as we're all human beings, they just make a mistake. So we're investigating this. When that's the case, then we do training. We go back and retrain everybody on the policies and the steps of how to do these jobs safely. All of our employees are recovering from the accident and being treated. And I think the last one who was being treated is being released from his treatment today, and will be back to work, or back home, I'm sorry. 2 of them have been treated and are back to work already. 2 of them will be off for a little while longer.
Thank you, Andy. And Commissioner BARAD, will be having a corporate safety presentation next week, or not next week, but at the next board meeting, where I think we'll deal with these overall safety issues in a broader context. But thank you for following up.
Thank you, Andy.
You're welcome.
Yes, Andy, thank you. And again, thank you, Commissioner BARAD, for the question. It's important. So, Clean Grid LA plan update. Is this Mr. Rendu?
Thank you, Commissioners, and good afternoon. My name is Jason Rondu. I'm Director of Resource Planning, Development, and Programs. And I'm going to give the presentation today on the Clean Grid LA Plan. I want to just remind everybody that back in January, we presented to this board some of the key findings from the LA 100 study. And since that time, we've completed half of the outreach to the public on the LA 100 study. And the remaining half of that outreach will wrap up at the end of this month. But a lot has occurred between January and now that has really put us in a position to where we need to take action in the near term on a lot of the findings and the common areas across LA 100. On the next slide, we'll do a quick recap of the LA 100, and this started a number of years ago at the direction of the City Council, and it really looks at different ways to get to 100% renewable energy. It also looks at what the benefits to the environment and the potential impacts to local jobs and the economy, and then it looks at this through the lens of equity and environmental justice. But specifically, it looks at 4 key ways on the next slide of getting to 100%. And while there are many ways to get to 100%, the way we get there can be very different. These different scenarios, we won't go into a bunch of detail today on these various scenarios. We've done that in the past, and today's presentation is largely focused on what we need to do in the near term. But these scenarios give us sort of bookends of what we can expect. And one of these scenarios actually looks at how to get to 100% by 2035. But what was really interesting from the LA 100 study is a common across all of these scenarios is investments that we need to make, particularly in the next 10 years. And you can see those common areas of investments on the next slide. And it's really in 3 major categories. The first is local resources. No matter which way we get to 100%, there is a dramatic increase in local resources. So that means local storage, customer-owned solar, demand response, things like smart thermostats, and building electrification. The second area is transmission. Even if we were to focus on maximizing local resources, we need significant transmission built out, particularly within the city of LA, and that means upgrades to existing lines, expanding the capacity of existing lines. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then finally, one of the key and most important findings from the LA 100 study is to do this reliably and to actually provide power at all times of the day and be able to withstand resiliency events like wildfires and earthquakes and other unplanned issues. There needs to be a significant amount of in-basin capacity, so renewably fueled dispatchable turbines. And so that ranges from a minimum of about 2,600 megawatts up to over 5,000 megawatts. So that is an important finding of this study. But since the conclusion of this study, on the next slide, was the announcement of the 2035 100% clean energy target by the mayor and the state of the city. The study was completed back in March, and the announcement happened on April 19th. That also included, in addition to that, an interim target of getting to 80% renewable by 2030, which is really important because that means we will be 97% carbon free by 2030. There was also a mention of transitioning scattergrid, and we'll see in a moment the importance of that to run on green hydrogen, and also not over-relying on valley generating stations, so finding ways to decrease the dependence and rapidly decrease the gas usage at valley generating stations. So what that means for us is we've got the study that does not contain a recommendation. What we need to do is kick off our long-term power plan, but that process takes a year's time to do. And given the significant amount of investment that we need to make, particularly over the next 10 years, we don't have the luxury of waiting another year to come up with a recommended case. And so on the next slide, you'll see the convergence of these 2 efforts. So we've got the LA 100 study that basically charts different options to get to 100% by 2035. We need to decide that path through the strategic long-term resource plan. But what we're trying to recognize today is there are common areas that we can do now, regardless of the path towards 100%, that will help make sure that we stay ahead of the curve to get to 100% clean energy by 2035. And those common investments comprise today's presentation, which is the Clean Grid LA plan, which really focuses on the next 10 years, the decade of action that we have ahead of us. On the next slide, you'll see the guiding principles by which we looked at this plan. Developing this near-term plan meant that we said, let's find ways to recognize that we need to have dramatic reduction in GHGs and gas usage, not just on a system level, but especially in basin. We know that doing so, we need to do it equitably, which means ensuring that we have reduced usage, dramatically reduced usage at Valley, but we know that there's going to be a significant increase in distributed resources. So ensuring that that is done equitably is extraordinarily important because this transition is going to be largely funded by rates. And to the degree that we can minimize the rate impact to disadvantaged communities and communities on low-income rates is going to be extraordinarily important for us. We also want to make sure that we can do this in a way that's resilient. What I mean by resilient is our ability to continue to deliver power in the event that we have issues like wildfires or issues like earthquakes. In 1994, we lost all of our import capability due to the Northridge earthquake. We weren't able to import power through transmission lines. The same thing happened in 2019 with the Saddle Ridge fire. 10 years prior to that, in 2009, we had the Sayre fire. We know that wildfires are happening more often, so we need to plan a system that has the ability to stay resilient from the perspective of those types of events. Affordability is so crucial for the reasons that I said, but it's also important because we need to see significant electrification. If we don't do this affordably, we won't see the electrification that we need, and we won't see the decarbonization of the electric vehicle sector and building electrification. And then finally, the Clean Grid LA plan needs to make sure that we are staying ahead of the curve and that we're consistent with our 100% goals. On the next slide, you'll see the 5 elements of the Clean Grid LA plan, and we can click through to show all of the 5 elements on here. The first is 80% renewable by 2030. This means that we're gonna have to bring on 3,000 megawatts of new renewables. The second is transmission. I mentioned earlier that under all the scenarios to get to 100%, all roads lead to 100%, there are very different ways to get there. All of the ways to get to 100% mean lots of transmission upgrades and an unprecedented amount of transmission upgrades. We know from the LA 100 study that local generation needs to be transformed to run on renewable fuels. It needs to be decarbonized. We also know that energy storage is going to see a dramatic growth, not just within the city, but also external resources. And then finally, distributed energy resources equitably. We emphasize equity here. It's important across all of these 5 elements, but it's extremely important here because there's a co-investment often required with customers and the utility for distributed resources. We know that historically our distributed resource programs have not been distributed equitably. We need to set goals, we need to develop strategies to make sure that that happens in order to make sure that this is a successful transition. So starting with, on the next slide, a summary of our 80% renewable. I mentioned that this is going to take 3,000 megawatts of new renewable projects. We have the opportunity to leverage the existing external transmission resources that we have. Those transmission lines were really successful in bringing low-cost fossil fuel resources to the city in the past. As we decommission those fossil fuel resources and bring on renewables, we have a phenomenal opportunity to bring the energy to the city. But bringing the energy to the city and bringing it into the city where it's needed to the load center is a very different challenge, which brings us to the concept of we need to make sure that we have the ability not just to get it to the city, but within the city. And you can see that on the next slide, where we have 10 transmission projects that we need to complete within the next 10 years. And these are largely upgrades to existing transmission projects in order to, like I said, bring that renewable power within the city where it's needed. This is really an unprecedented build out in a short amount of time. Some of our larger transmission projects within the city have taken over a decade just for one project. So we need to find ways to dramatically expedite these things, do these things in sequence. One really important concept that I want to emphasize is the nexus between local capacity, so local generation, and transmission. When we do these upgrades, we have to take lines out of commission to upgrade them. when we take those lines out of commission, we need to make sure that we have ample resources within the city in the event that there's an outage. So if we take a line out and then there's another event like a wildfire or a high heat day or something like that, we need to make sure that we have the resources in the city to back those resources up. That doesn't mean we're running them all the time. It means we have them available to ensure it's reliable, which brings us to our next element, which is transforming local generation. On the next slide. So the first thing that we're proposing is to do a request for information for green hydrogen within the city. There was a comment earlier during the public comment period that recognized the challenge of doing hydrogen, green hydrogen locally within the city. At Intermountain Power, we have a confluence of renewable resources. We have space, we have salt caverns. It's really just a perfect location to do something like hydrogen. We know from the LA100 study that we need to find decarbonized resources, long duration capacity within the city. So we need to get a head start to figure out what is available today to either build out that capacity, to figure out how to either store it, transport it, and distribute it. We need to know this doesn't necessarily commit us to anything. There will be opportunities to vet projects and that sort of thing, but we need to get a head start on this. We really have 10 years before we need to put a lot of this into action. We know at Scattergood, we need capacity. That's one of the—
Wait, can I stop you there, Jason? Sorry. So when do you intend to launch that RFI, and how broad is it? And will you please send it to me?
Yeah, so I'll end on kind of the next, at the very last slide, we talk about what we would do next. And we would be ready to go in the near term on the RFI. Should there be a need to go into more detail with the board, we can certainly do that. But I can talk a little bit more to that towards the end, if that's okay.
Okay.
So at Scattergood, we have our most immediate need for capacity, and in a moment, I'll explain why. We have an opportunity to utilize an existing resource that is one of our newest units in our fleet at Haynes in order to minimize the reliance on Valley and avoid stranded investment. We'll talk about that in a moment too. And then we'll summarize the impacts to Valley of all of these efforts and exactly where we are today and where we could be in the future should we take action on all of these elements. So on the next slide, we'll focus on Scattergood. So while LA100 emphasized the need for local capacity, we have the most immediate need at Scattergood. We know from transmission reliability studies that have been done internally and today, they'll be decommissioned the schedule is to decommission them by the end of 2024, which leaves us with a significant shortage of capacity for transmission reliability. And I mentioned earlier the significance of not necessarily using the capacity, but having that capacity available should we need it in the event that we have transmission reliability issues. We have load growth, particularly in this part of the city. We know that the port, there's going to be significant electrification, same thing at LAX, Operation Next at Hyperion, and on top of that, electric vehicle adoption and building electrification over the coming decades. It's not without its challenges. I mentioned, the contrast of doing projects like this externally. We have limited footprint at Scattergood, so it is our most immediate need, and it's one of our most challenging locations. So the two things that we need to do here is immediately initiate the process to do new capacity, new hydrogen capacity at Scattergood, and concurrently seek an extension of the units 1 and 2 to make sure there's no gap in capacity and there's no reliability issues. But what we also have is an opportunity for early net ocean-cooled capacity compliance, meaning we can actually reduce the amount of water between now and our OTC dates with this plan. So that brings us to the next slide. Haynes Unit 8 is one of our most efficient units. It's the second most efficient unit in our fleet. It was built in 2005. It has a useful life of at least 30 years, which means we're paying debt on this unit for about 15 more years. It is more efficient than units at Valley, which means should this unit be decommissioned Valley generating station would be dispatched more frequently. So this gets back to the concept earlier where we said we don't want to over-rely on Valley during the critical next 10 years of this transformation. We have the opportunity as well with the RFI to explore, when we do this, how can we do this in a way that it enables hydrogen use at this location. And I mentioned earlier that this unit is scheduled to be off of ocean cooling by 2029. We could potentially do this earlier and have a net reduction in water use. The scattergate units that are scheduled to be off of ocean cooling by 2024, we very infrequently use those. Those are very, very old units. The Haynes unit is, like I said, it's one of our newest units. It's one of our most efficient. It's used often. We have the ability to bring this off of ocean-cooled water in the near term and have a net reduction and have a net environmental benefit from the perspective of OTC compliance. And again, the emphasis here is capacity, not usage. We know from LA100 that utilization will drop dramatically, and you'll see in a moment utilization of Valley. It is about having that capacity when you need it and accelerating the conversion of that capacity to decarbonized through green hydrogen. So on the next slide, we can see what this will mean for Valley generating stations. So today we use Valley about 30% of the time. So on average, over the course of a year, we use it about 30%. It doesn't mean it's running at 30% all the time. There are days where it's not used, and there are times where it's used back-to-back if there's really high heat days. The combination of getting to 80% renewables by 2030, the Haynes recycled water cooling, and scattergate capacity would bring Valley usage down from 30% today to about 5%, which means it would really only be used extraordinarily infrequently. Now that's in the near term. Ultimately, the usage would be fully decarbonized, as we said earlier. If we don't take these actions, if we do nothing, and it's sort of the business as usual case, because of load growth and because of decommissioning OTC units, Valley utilization would go from 30 to nearly 60%. So in the absence of taking action on this, that's how Valley would be dispatched. At Valley, we also have a great opportunity with the space at Valley to do more clean energy projects there. So, you know, the RFI can look at potential hydrogen opportunities, but there's also opportunities to look at solar and storage and other projects as well. So a really great opportunity to transform Valley generating station. On the next slide, accelerating energy storage. So that's not just, on the next slide, it's not just, you know, external. We know that we need a significant amount of energy storage external, but we need it in basin as well. So we want to do, between now and 2030, 1,000 megawatts of energy storage. And we want to do a lot of that by looking at energy storage near or at our in-basin generating stations. I say near or at because there are a lot of safety considerations that we need to work through over the next year or two. And part of doing that is piloting technologies outside of the city. So we're negotiating a liquefied air energy storage project at Beacon Energy Storage. Should those negotiations go well, should that prove out, we may have the opportunity to do something locally for that. And there's obviously the opportunity with lithium-ion, subject to safety issues being addressed. We also are going to co-locate storage and with all of our utility scale solar projects. We've done that for the last couple, but we essentially are going to only look at solar in combination with storage, unless there's an extraordinarily rare case where there's there's just no way to do it, and we could get really cheap solar. But for the most part, it's going to be coupled with energy storage. And we also did an RFP in 2020 where we have essentially an open solicitation for energy storage projects that vendors can submit to, and we've had some submissions to that as well. And then to round this out, we know that we can utilize cascade pump storage even more than we do today to balance and integrate renewable energy. So that moves us to accelerating distributed energy resources equitably on the next slide. So we know that we need to do 1,000 more megawatts of local solar by 2030 and 500 megawatts of demand response, so smart thermostats, other forms of demand response. And we need to continue our efforts on energy efficiency and doubling our targets there. And electric vehicles will be a huge, huge part of this. We're not spending a lot of time on electrification today, but we need to emphasize that the success of our transition to 100% really relies on electric vehicles, and it relies on doing this equitably. It's not sustainable to do it if we don't do it equitably. We know that historically our distributed energy resource programs have not been adopted equitably. A couple anecdotes, our thermostat program has done really well, and we've reached nearly 50% of adoption in disadvantaged communities. But we've had solar programs that have been in place for over 20 years, and less than a third of that has been in disadvantaged communities. And we know even within that third that those largely go to folks that own homes, not necessarily renters or multifamily. And so what we're proposing is to adopt a target of 50% for new DER investment to go into disadvantaged communities. Now, we need to look at this further because adopting a target of 50% doesn't tell us how we will get there. And it doesn't tell us how we bring us to a target that's more consistent. Now, our city is about 45% disadvantaged communities, so this target would only be day 4. We need to look back and figure out, maybe we need a target potentially above this, but at this point, this is a target that we're proposing for today, but more work needs to go into this. We also want to continue the significant effort we've made on DERs today. In particular, last year earlier this year, we brought to the board 2 really innovative programs, our Feed-in Tariff Plus program, which was launched recently, and our virtual net metering program. So a lot of opportunities to scale those programs to address things like energy storage and address things like equity as well. But this is going to be a really significant amount of work, and on the next slide you'll get a sense of how much work is ahead of us. So the LA 100 scenario that calls for 100% by 2035 says you need to build out a certain amount of megawatts of capacity. I'm going to focus on in-basin because that's really where our major challenge is. For dispatchable hydrogen-capable units, we need to have about 2,200 megawatts by 2030. Now, by 2035, excuse me. What that means is today we have 0 megawatts of hydrogen capacity. So we need to either convert, retrofit, major retrofit, or build new until we get to that point, which means we'd have to do about 175 megawatts on average per year. We've done 0 megawatts of new capacity over the last 5 or 6 years, so to give you an idea. And that doesn't mean we'd have a project every year of 175. It means that we'd have either retrofit or new construction or something. And again, there's going to be course corrections along the way, new technologies and that sort of thing. But this is the level of challenge we're up against. On the PV and storage side, we need over 4,000 megawatts by 2035, which is about 350 a year. To give you some perspective, last year we interconnected 50 megawatts per year. So this is a dramatic growth in local in-basin resources. None of this addresses a concept that just came up prior to this presentation, which is on the distribution side. The LA 100 study looked at all the investments that we need to make on top of our planned investments, which means there's an assumption that our planned investments on the distribution system are done. So we have all of that existing work to do, plus all of this work to do. So there's a significant urgency for us to get started now and not wait another year for us to go through our long-term power plan and adopt a path towards 100%. So that brings us to our last slide, which builds on the urgency that I just mentioned on that first bullet. The next 10 years is really critical, obviously, to get to 2035 because of that common area of investment, and we don't necessarily need to wait. I already mentioned electrification and then the importance of taking action at Scattergood. We also know that we need to request an extension of Scattergood 1 and 2. Having a plan like the Clean Grid LA plan helps us build that support to show why we need Scattergood 1 and 2. So having a plan like this is important for us to build that support. Really importantly, in 2028, there's going to be Olympics. There's going to be 2 million more people in the greater Los Angeles area in the middle of the summer, and it means 2 things. It means more demand. It means 3 things. It means more demand. It means that there are going to be moratoriums on construction, which means our local transmission build-out is going to be even more difficult. And it's going to mean that, obviously the state of the world, the country is going to be looking at us, so we need to make sure that we're providing reliable power and that we've got a plan underway. So there's a lot of urgency to take action right now and get this underway, which brings us to the next step. So I mentioned that LA100 outreach is going to be wrapping up at the end of this month, and we have an opportunity to seek feedback on this plan as well. We need to continue the engagement on equity and environmental justice. LA100 looked at it through the lens of where the benefit's going, and the disadvantaged communities do have the opportunity to benefit. But the conclusion was that we can do this equitably, but we need to have intentionally designed programs to do that. We need to do the work to figure out how to do the intentional design. There are a lot of roadblocks to designing programs that are deployed equitably. So there's a lot of work that remains to be done here. We need to advertise the hydrogen RFI. We could be potentially ready to advertise that within several weeks, obviously subject to feedback at the board today. And then commencing the approval for the Haynes recycled water cooling project. The next step would be submitting that for CAO review and then bringing it to board for consideration. And then beginning the CEQA process for scattergood green hydrogen capacity. Once that environmental process was concluded, it would then be brought to board to approve that determination of the environmental process. Later in 2021, not right now, but later in 2021, we would bring to the board consideration of a plan to extend scattergood 1 and 2, and that board approval would be necessary for us to seek state approval for that. So these are the major next steps, and that concludes the presentation. So I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Jason. Are there questions or comments from board members on this presentation?
I just have clarification questions. And first, thank you so much. This is very informative, and it gives us, more or less a line of sight as to how we're going to get there. So just a point of clarification, you mentioned about the limited footprint at Scattergood. Is there enough space for infrastructure for the hydrogen production there? And are we repurposing the hydrogen combustion units at Scattergood? Is that why we are able to do that?
Yeah, the short answer is we have sufficient capacity or sufficient space to build the capacity. What is a bigger question is when it comes to either the production, the storage, or the transport of hydrogen, that's where something like the RFI is going to shed a lot of light. Because the larger answer is, there might be parcels adjacent to Scattergood that we could potentially use, or we may find that, the production and storage, can't work at, right on site. We may need to do it, in partnership with another parcel. Long story short is for the capacity, yes. For all of the other hydrogen-related elements, the RFI will help shed light on that.
And with the extension, that are we banking on the extension to give us that cushion to do the RFI for the hydrogen? Is that the purpose for that? I'm just looking at the sense of urgency.
Yeah. So the urgency, there's no cushion. To maintain the capacity at Scattergood, to maintain transmission reliability, and to make sure that we have the capacity to build out the transmission to bring the renewables into the city, we need the extension because it would take us at least 74 months to build new capacity at Scattergood, which puts us well beyond 2024. So we need that extension to basically bridge that gap to make sure that we don't have any gap in capacity. The RFI would be concurrent.
I want to know how. I could ask this a number of ways, but first of all, thank you. A very thorough presentation and very interesting. How do we, meaning DWP, have a process of tracking all these scenarios? How do you sleep at night? You have so much to do in the next years. I'm so impressed. at, you know, all these scenarios, and it's kind of coming at us and at you, as you know, and how do you switch off from you know, as things start sort of developing? Is there, in the past, we've asked ourselves if you have the right technology to help yourselves sort of be effective, and to track, sort of, you know, and to be able to pivot at critical points, which is what you're talking about, being able to pivot, but having enough of a sort of enough foresight, and some ground truthing about, you know, what's a given, right? The given is you're going to get there at a certain, you know, you have a deadline. So do you feel like you have enough you know, enough technology at your disposal to track and pivot?
Yeah, let me try to speak to that, and hopefully I can thoroughly address that. So I think the first concept that I would mention is that historically, when we do power plans, we plan with technology that's largely known and largely available. With cost declines,
yes,
which is you know, something we saw with solar, something we'll see with storage. But things like hydrogen are obviously emerging, and we're counting on, not counting, we're working really aggressively towards making sure that we see cost declines. That means, you know, the investments that we're making at Intermountain. That means partnerships with the industry, and that means seeking federal support to help mature that technology and drive those costs down. But also ensuring that we keep, you know, an open mind to other potential ways to decarbonize. You know, there are, you know, LA100 study said, you know, you could also do it with biofuels. A lot of challenges with biofuels, just like anything else, and some folks have concern over biofuels. But that is something that is something that LA100 did consider as well. I will say that, you know, you mentioned, you know, how do you sleep at night and that sort of thing. It does help to have, you know, staff that really has the ability to sort of model this, and it does help to have the support of NREL and have the attention on this, because it is a big challenge for us. The previous slide showed us it's an unprecedented build out. I will say that two areas that, and I'll end it here, two areas that really, really need to, you know, be exhaustively looked at is the equity piece, because if we don't do this in a way that's sustainable for a large portion of our customers, it's not going to be a sustainable transition. We have an opportunity to do this in a way that is equitable and affordable and reliable. And if we do that, it can be a model for the state and the rest of the country. The other piece is LA100 looked at overall staffing. We need to drill down and look at LADWP staffing and figure out what we need to do in the near term in order to make sure we've got, and there's a lot of challenges with that. It's not just necessarily like, you know, new positions. It's, you know, sometimes we can't get a lot of folks off of, you know, and graduate into some of our more critical positions and keep them here. So those are the two areas that I think we need to spend a lot of time and a lot of attention on. The modeling piece of it, I think, you know, our staff has just done an absolutely bang up job of, you know, looking at the different ways to get to 100%.
Thank you very much, Jason. What is what did you study?
Do you mean in education-wise?
Are you an engineer?
Yeah, I studied engineering.
Okay.
There.
Thank you. Yes.
Remember, you've got the heart out at 2.
Yeah, right. All right. It was fascinating. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments?
No, not really. Just to reiterate my interest in knowing when the RFI comes out for the hydrogen, and really, like I echo everyone's comments that this is a lot, and we're here to support it. So let us know what we can do.
I would say to make
I would just want to say that this has been a significant journey, and represents the end product represents not only the collaboration and investment and third-party support of NREL, but also is a reflection of the long-term planning efforts by our own staff, which has been superlative, coupled with the support and review of our ratepayer advocates. So I'm extremely pleased to see where we are and want to acknowledge the contributions of the entire department to getting us here. I will say that I also want to make the observation that this very much echoes sort of the overall picture, very much echoes the substantial investment of time in the education that I received when I got on the board. I think back to long conversations with Eric Montag and also Louis Ting about the interdependence between transmission and local generation. And the need to keep that relationship front and center as we move forward to looking at and achieving our 100% renewable goals. And as Jason's presentation makes clear, local generation is a critical component of our system's reliability and ability to do the job that it does. And transmission continues to be a significant hurdle to be addressed as we move forward. We will start to see more frequent and more in-depth presentations related to our power system ongoing transition, on a much more frequent basis at the board, where we're able to do a much deeper dive into some of these areas that have been presented today. In particular, I look forward to a presentation on the transmission projects. We've been told now over and over that there are 10, that they've got to be done in 10 years. And without that, some component of this fails. I think we need to understand a lot more about what that is, what that looks like, and how we actually intend to achieve how we intend to accomplish whatever metric that you're putting forward as essential to move forward. And then with respect to the continued and deeper look at equity, we hope to have something before the board in the next 30 to 45 days that will allow the staff and potentially Enrail to continue that aspect of system evaluation as it relates to LA 100. And then finally, what I want to say is that we have not yet begun to address the other elephant in the room, and that is rates as it relates to moving these plans forward. And I look forward to working with our executive team, especially power staffing and our ratepayer advocate, and of course with Ann Santilli to begin to outline next steps as it relates to the actual fiscal impact and rate impact of the work that we'll need to incorporate into a rate case to be clear that our plans and our budgeting are in balance, and that we are being transparent in terms of how this impacts our ratepayers. So those are my overall comments around this. Dr. Pickle, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
One, I wanted to reiterate what's been said is power system planning has, in the 9 years I've been here, has leapt forward a generation, not just 9 years, in terms of its sophistication. Now it's on the leading edge. But there are some big assumptions. We're still reviewing the rate impacts and the costs and benefits on this. The NREL study was very good, but they purposefully didn't make recommendations. If you look at the costs and benefits, the costs and benefits don't support all the choices we have in front of us. One of the biggest results, one of the biggest assumptions is that sales at DWP, because of electrification, we're going to grow about 20% over the next 5 to 10 years. Well, in the last 5 to 10 years, our sales have gone down by 10%, not up. And Norway is the most electric vehicle intense country, or Oslo is. The incremental sales of electric cars, plug-in electric and full electric, are, I believe, 80% in Oslo. But electric load in Norway hasn't grown that much. It's grown about 2%. So, and that's over the last 5 years. So the question is, can we really translate these things into load growth? Load growth is a big component of our costs staying stable or not going up too quickly. So that's one of our big challenges moving forward. The other question is, how fast can we really afford to move? And how far can we get ahead? And if it becomes expensive for us, what grants or other support is available, or other forms of support are available to help DWP be on the leading edge in doing this? Those are my comments.
Thank you for that. And I want to just be clear for folks who may be listening with concern. Acknowledging challenges does not signal any plan to retreat, but it's only the fact is that we have to acknowledge them so that we can begin to tackle them. And I know that there are folks all across this department that are anxious to begin to assess and to come up with ways of addressing the myriad of challenges that exist as we seek to implement the plans that have been outlined in one form or fashion. So thank you for that. If there's nothing else, we have filed reports to cover on the agenda. Both the monthly report from FSO and an informational report on the LA equity metrics. Are there questions or comments on 9A? Okay, then that's terrific. We'll move to 9B. Are there questions or comments on 9B? Seeing none, then we are ready to move into closed session. Board Counsel, if you will say the magic words that allow us to go into closed session, that'd be terrific.
At this point, we will recess in a closed session to address the items on item number 22 of the agenda. In accordance with California Government Code Section 54957.B1, we will report any final actions taken therein. Commission President, what time would you like to convene closed session at?
If we could, I know we've got to give our board secretary time to move. So if we could go in at 1:15, it's 1:06 now, that would be terrific.
At this point, we are in recess until 1:15, at which time we will reconvene in closed session.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please remain silent until all microphones are turned off. Thank you.
And please remember, you have a specific closed session dial-in that's not this dial-in.